Hello, everybody. My name is Josh Creason. I'm the assistant pastor here at South Charlotte Pres, and I'm glad you guys are tuning in to this devotional this week. No doubt you probably already at some point in time have probably groaned. Maybe you wouldn't use that term, but you probably felt that groaning within, whether it's been from the virus itself or the stay-at-home orders or the death, sickness, discouraging news feeds, and isolation that many and some of us have experienced. Maybe you haven't thought of it as groaning, but we all groan when we see the brokenness and the fallenness that is in our world and even in ourselves. But when you feel it, what do you do with it? Do you stew inwardly with it? Do you get grumpy, or do you look to distract yourself with something else? I want to encourage you to go to the Lord in prayer, and specifically using the Psalms. And what I want to do is I want to specifically focus on Psalm 22. Psalm 22, for some of you, you'll recognize it. Jesus quoted these words when he was on the cross, and it's appropriate. Here you have the Son of God on the cross. He's sinless, perfect, and he cries out to his Father, my God, why have you forsaken me?" And it's appropriate. He wasn't out of bounds in this because he was sinless. And so I want to encourage you guys that as you come and as you deal with uh, trials or distresses or temptations or any kind of difficulty, to come to the Lord in prayer and to take it to Him. This is something too often I try to deal with it myself, and I don't go to Him as I should, going to Him first thing. But when I do go to Him, what do I say? What's the language I use? Well, Psalm 22 can be really helpful for us. And I just want to point out a few things to help guide you as you think about going to the Lord in these times and praying to Him and bringing these things before Him. The first thing I want to encourage you guys to do, you can see in verses 1 and 2, is to bring your questions to God. God can handle it. God can take it. You know, he says clearly he's been going before the Lord more than once, and he's telling him he's been crying out to him, and he's wondering why he does not answer. He's asking questions of God, crying out to him, my God. So bring your questions to God. But then you'll notice he moves into affirming God's character. That's the second thing he does in verse 3. Yet you are holy, enthroned on the praises of Israel. So don't forget God's character. But then he remembers the deliverances of God. He rehearses history. You know, as someone has said, Christians like balloons, we leak, so we forget things. We need to remember the deliverances God has already done in history, in our own lives and in the broader church history. And then also, this is the favorite part. I love this part of Psalm 22. Tell him the details of the situation. It might sound funny because you think, well, he already knows everything. But tell him the details. Tell him generally what's going on. Tell him what it's doing to you emotionally. I mean, the psalmist says, my heart melts within me. And also tell him what it's doing to you physically. And also tell him about your enemy. I know we don't have enemies in terms of the kind of enemies that David did, but we have the world, we have the flesh, we have the devil. Tell him the details of your situation and tell him what's going on. And then remember your salvation that has come to you from God. David says this in verses 9 and 10. Yet you are he who took me from the womb. You made me trust you at my mother's breasts. On you I was cast from my birth, and from my mother's womb you have been my God. And so remember your salvation to God in your prayer. But then ask him to deliver. That's something that's very clear in verse 11 and verses 19 through 21. Ask him to deliver you. Cry out to him. And then lastly, this is an interesting part of this psalm in particular. but proclaim and live for the Lord before others, whether it's people in the church, whether it's your non-Christian friends and neighbors and acquaintances. Proclaim and live for him before them. Because what's interesting is verses 30 and 31 show us then that that has the effect of influencing others who will then proclaim. And so there's this outward approach to these things. So I want to encourage you, as you go to the Lord, go to him in prayer. Bring these things to him. Bring your questions to God. Affirm the character, who he is. Remember his deliverances. Tell him the details of your situation. And remember how he has saved you. And then ask him to deliver you. And then most of all, don't forget that the words you speak outside proclaim and live for the Lord before others, so that they will then proclaim and live for him. I hope this encourages you. This has been an encouragement to me in my prayers to help me find the language of how to pray to the Lord and what to pray for. I'm going to include an outline after this for about 20 seconds or so that you can see it, because this is hard to grasp, I get. But I want you guys to have this as you think about going to the Lord in prayer. It's good to be with you. I hope you guys have a good weekend and week to come.